If you've ever had depression, you know how it can sap any sense of reward or enjoyment or pleasure out of life. It's something we call anhedonia, and in today's video, I'll be talking about what you can do to overcome anhedonia. Hi everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about part 2 of this mini-series on anhedonia and talking about ways to help cope with this really troubling and upsetting symptom of depression. But before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. Now, with those things out of the way, let's start talking about how to cope with anhedonia. So as I've talked about in a previous video, anhedonia is a common symptom found in depression, and at its core, it's a loss of interest and pleasure in almost all of your usual activities. So things that you used to enjoy doing, things that you used to feel really motivated and excited about doing, you just don't enjoy anymore. You just don't get any sense of pleasure or reward out of. And so the question becomes, if you're experiencing anhedonia, what can you do about it? So I don't feel any pleasure or reward out of these things. How do I bring that pleasure and reward back into my life? So the first step, and it might sound a bit strange or a bit uncomfortable to take this step, is actually a step of acceptance. To accept what anhedonia is, and to accept that if you're experiencing anhedonia, that you can't force yourself to feel anything. Oftentimes when I'm working with my clients, they get really down on themselves. They get really upset with themselves for having anhedonia, right? So I'm dealing with a parent and they don't get any sense of enjoyment or reward out of playing with their children anymore. And they get really down on themselves. And they tend to beat themselves up over the fact that if they were a good parent, they wouldn't have to try and force themselves to enjoy playing with their kids. I find that clients will beat themselves up over the fact that they don't really want to go out with their friends. They don't have any interest or desire to go out anymore. And they get down on themselves for not returning text messages or phone calls or declining invites to do social activities because they just don't feel like it. Well, if you have anhedonia, that's what's driving this lack of interest or pleasure. It's not a character flaw. It's not something wrong with you that you don't want to do these things. It's a symptom of depression. And so part of this, and the first step, is to kind of give yourself a break if you're experiencing anhedonia. So somewhere along the lines, we picked up this notion that mental health and mental health difficulties were kind of a character flaw or a sign of weakness, and the way out of it is to just be stronger. Well, if you're experiencing anhedonia, you can't just be stronger. You can't just force yourself to feel things. Because if we had control over our emotions, we would never choose to be depressed or anxious. We would just always choose to be happy and satisfied, but we don't control directly how we feel. And so the first step in overcoming anhedonia is to accept that it's there and that it's part of the depression and not a sign of a character flaw, or not a sign of you being a bad parent or you being a bad friend, or that there's something inherently and characteristically wrong with you. So that's the first step, accepting the anhedonia. So understanding what it is, understanding that it's a symptom of depression and not something wrong with you. So once you've done that, once you've kind of accepted that and aren't beating yourself up about having the anhedonia, the second step is to just focus on behavior, just doing an activity. So if you used to enjoy painting and you get no sense of pleasure or reward or interest in painting anymore, the way to overcome the anhedonia is to just start painting again. And to do this in small steps. And I've done a video on goal setting to help give you a model for understanding how you can actually set up these realistic, practical goals, even if you're not feeling motivated to do these things. So the idea is to resume painting, and it may just start with, spending 5 minutes painting. And you may feel nothing while you do it. You may not enjoy it one bit. But the key is just keep focusing on doing it, because that's what you have control over. Just focus on the doing, not the feeling, right? This is where people will often get tripped up, is that, okay, I'll do the 5 minutes of painting, but in that 5 minutes of painting, I want to experience that spark that I used to have. And so I do the 5 minutes of painting, but I don't experience the spark. It's a failure. No, it's not a failure, because the goal and the focus is just on doing the behavior, just the 5 minutes of painting. And you do that for a little bit, and then you maybe bump it up to 10 minutes of painting, and then 15 minutes of painting. And you give yourself opportunities to re-engage in these behaviors, re-engage in these activities that you used to enjoy doing that you don't enjoy doing anymore. So that's the second step, is, so you've accepted the anhedonia. The second step is to just start engaging in these behaviors and these activities again. And the third step in terms of overcoming anhedonia is perseverance. Perseverance in continuing with doing these activities that you used to enjoy, even though you don't enjoy doing them. So this is where a lot of my clients will start to push back on me and will say, okay, look, I can mindlessly just sit down and paint for 5 minutes. I can return the text message to my friend, or even go out for coffee with my friend once every couple of weeks. I can go for that 15-minute hike in the forest. But if I'm not enjoying it, if I'm not having any fun doing it, if it feels like a chore or it feels exhausting to do, why should I continue to do it? Isn't the point of these activities to enjoy them? Yes, the point of the activities is to enjoy them. But this is how you bring that enjoyment back. So the metaphor I like to use to explain what's going on here is to imagine one of those old-fashioned water pumps. And you've got this water pump at the top of a well, and there's water way down, and you want to try and bring that water up to the spout of the old-fashioned water pump. And so when you first start, the water's right down at the bottom of the well. There's no water sort of has gone up the pipe. The pump hasn't been primed. And so the idea is you have to pump the handle of the water pump. And as you're pumping the handle of the water pump, there's no water coming out. Well, there's no water coming out because the water's at the bottom of the well. And so it's going to take a lot of pumping to draw the water up the well. But the more you pump, the more you're doing that work, it is actually bringing the water up. Even though you can't see it, even though you can't see that it's doing anything, these are actually critically important steps in order to get that water to come out from the well. And so you keep pumping and pumping and pumping, and you're thinking, what is the point of doing all of this pumping? I just need the water. I just want the water, but I'm doing this pumping and I'm not getting any water. The more you pump, eventually the water will come. But you had to do all that work without any water in order for you to finally get the water to come out at the spout, at the top of the well. It's the same with these types of re-engaging in activities that you used to enjoy doing to overcome anhedonia. You may do these activities and feel nothing while you do them. You may not get any sense of enjoyment out of doing them. But eventually, if you persevere, if you continue to just engage in these activities, eventually the reward, the pleasure, the enjoyment, and the motivation will return. You just need to prime that pump. And it may mean doing things that you should enjoy and not enjoying them at all, but keep doing them and persevere in continuing to do them. Eventually the reward and the enjoyment will come. And so I think it's important to think about recovering from depression and recovering from anhedonia as kind of a series of changes that happen at different times. So think of it kind of like a train. The engine of the train is your behavior. Your behavior is what pulls this train forward. So the behavior is the first thing to change. You engage in the activities. You start going for regular 15-minute walks in the forest. Don't feel anything at first. But then gradually over time, as you continue to do this, what I find typically happens is people start to experience and to start to re-experience a sense of enjoyment in it. So the enjoyment or the pleasure in the activity returns or starts to return, being pulled by the behavior. So the second car of this train is that sense of enjoyment or reward. So while I'm doing the activity, I enjoy it. So as I'm going for this hike, I start to notice that, you know what, it is nice to get out into the fresh air. And I start to feel that sense of why I used to enjoy doing this. But I can have that enjoyment while I'm doing the activity, but still not feel motivated to do the activity. So when I'm outside of, or when I'm not engaging in that hike, I may still feel like, I don't really want to go for a hike. I just don't have any motivation or interest in doing it. But eventually, the more you do it, the more you change the behavior, the more you engage in the behavior, the more the sense of the reward or enjoyment comes while you're doing the behavior. Eventually, then, the third car that gets pulled here by this train is the sense of motivation and drive to want to do this. So the anhedonia lifts in kind of like three stages. One is the behavior. Then the next step, the next thing that tends to lift is the enjoyment while you do the behavior. And the next thing that tends to lift after that is the motivation and interest to want to do the behavior. So this is really important to understand, because for a lot of people, they have this perception of why we engage in activities, how motivation and behavior works, or motivation and interest works. The idea is, for most people, they think, I'll feel motivated to do something, and when I'm motivated to do something, then I'll actually do it. So for a lot of people, their understanding of motivation is the motivation comes first, then it's followed by the action. But what we know is that that's kind of backwards. It's actually action that happens first, and the motivation follows the action. So one way of thinking about it is if you've ever played a musical instrument, right? So when you first start to learn to play a musical instrument, you're probably not all that motivated or interested in doing it. Maybe you are at first. Maybe you like the idea of playing the trumpet or playing the piano. I really want to engage in playing the piano. But when you first start to do it, it feels kind of awkward or uncomfortable, or you realize you're not really good at it, or it doesn't sound really good. It sounds kind of terrible, and it's so much work and it's so much effort, and you don't really enjoy doing it. You don't really want to do it. But the reason you're doing it is because your piano teacher is coming over in a few days and you have to practice this. Otherwise, the piano teacher's not going to be particularly happy with you. And so you're engaging in playing piano, but you kind of have to force yourself or push yourself to do it because it's not really that inherently rewarding or enjoyable at first because you don't really know what you're doing. But over time, as the more you do it, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. The greater sense of confidence in your ability. And the more confident in your ability, the more you feel like you're actually progressing, the more you feel like you're actually getting better. Well, what happens then, you start to enjoy it and you start to look forward to doing it. And so the motivation actually begins to occur at that point. And you start to look forward to practicing piano rather than something that you used to dread or used to just have to do in order for your piano teacher not to be upset with you. But over time, the motivation has now come, and so you really look forward to it and really enjoy it. So motivation does not precede action. It's actually action that precedes motivation. And that is the key to overcoming anhedonia. It's the behavior, it's the action, it's the doing these activities that used to be enjoyable that's going to bring back the motivation. But it takes acceptance of the anhedonia, it takes effort in terms of the behavior, and it takes perseverance in terms of continuing to do that behavior even though you may not enjoy doing it. But understanding that the reason you continue to do it, in spite of the fact that you don't enjoy doing it, is because eventually the water's going to come from that well. Eventually the reward and the enjoyment is going to come back. Eventually the motivation and the drive is going to come back. So those are the key steps in terms of overcoming anhedonia. And so if you want to learn more about goal setting and how to actually change your behavior or to re-engage in these activities in a way that's sustainable, check out the goal setting videos because they can really help give you some practical steps for what to do there. So I hope this video has been helpful in terms of giving you a sense of how to overcome anhedonia. I'd love to hear your thoughts or comments about this, so please leave me some comments in the comments section down below. If you've been enjoying my videos and would like to see more, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll be alerted every week when I post a new video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.